Psychologists of Reddit, what made you realize you were treating a psychopath? When telling that he kept thinking about how killing people would be more fun than lame animals, stray cats and dogs and everything else he could catch. Only 11 years old. Clinical psychologist here. At first I didn't know. If anything, given the context, he was more put together than most of my patients. The subject of his criminal past came up. I only knew he had served prison time some years before, not what he was in for. I had met with him a month or two when this came up. Turns out it was 2 separate sentences served. Both were for rape. In both cases he was the exact thing we are afraid of, a guy lurking in a dark alley jumping a drunk girl. He told me about these things, as if he was talking about the weather. When it dawned on me that he expressed no remorse or guilt whatsoever, I got the same cold, gut-wrenching kind of primal fear you feel when you're out for a walk and almost step on snake. The PCLSV, that and when he was describing how he murdered 2 kids. He had no effect, didn't name them, justified his actions as not serious, etc. Took a few sessions to acknowledge the murder of the 2nd child. He was in denial, assuming I wouldn't like him if I knew he killed the other one too. Current psychologist working in a maximum security prison here. I've worked with 3 individuals I dare say would have met the criteria for antisocial personality disorder within the last 2 weeks. One commonality is that they use behaviors as tools to benefit only themselves. Self-harm not because they wish to hurt themselves, but to use it as a tool to lure staff into the cell to incite violence / gain extra medication / be sent to the SHU, which comes with a status boost. One person offered to get me a comfortable chair when we were in a session, not for my benefit, but so that they could ensure I stuck around for longer to talk with them. A lot of positive impression management also. Sometimes you feel they care, but there's unfortunately an ulterior motive. I'm onto you, Opus. Manipulate the psychologists into telling you how to avoid being caught out. Classic psychopath maneuver. Often there is a particular face they make when they are relating a story, usually about how clever they are. One of the TED Talks on how to spot a liar calls it back, quote, duping delight. Sometimes they can't contain their rage and you see them switch. Edit. Last sentence is a personal observation. When I was a student we had an interview with a lady that killed her baby child with a handgun because it cried so much that she couldn't take it. At first we weren't told that she was a psychopath and we were just told to listen to her side of the story. She was reading us from her journal that she made while she was in the institution. Not once did she mention that she was sad that her baby died or how what she did was bad. She was just reading angry thoughts about her husband that left her and turned her in the police about what she did. She was justifying the killing because the baby was so unbearable, and once she mentioned that she was angry and mad that her husband did not believe her, that she didn't have any other choice but to kill the baby. She was very smart and well spoken, and the whole time she was speaking she was trying to make us feel sorry for her for being locked up. We later learned that sometimes she was lying about not killing her baby and other times just brag about it, depending on who she was speaking with. Very normal looking person and very good speaker. You feel it in your gut first, using a validated measure and constructing a thorough case history to discuss in supervision. This is how you test your gut feeling. But you feel it often quite quickly. It tends to begin with just a sense that something is off. When you're doing therapy with someone, we tend to build up quite a strong rapport with people. So there's lots of micromimicry going on, and you start to tune in quite deeply to unconscious body language. When you're in this state, sometimes you just start to feel very uneasy, and you can't articulate verbally exactly why yet. This is often because of subtle macro expressions, super fast flashes of emotion, lasting fractions of a second that we perceive but don't consciously register. You see flashes of contempt related emotions and burglar smiles, basically emotions related to dominance and deception. The next thing you'll notice is a lot of use of projection going on. This starts quite quickly, usually in an assessment session. I mean, as an aside, being assessed by someone else can feel quite threatening to anyone's self-image, let alone a psychopath's. Quite predictably there will be status challenges, asking you about your credentials. your experience etc. And then often some put downs and eggs with plausible deniability. Egg. Joking that all psychologists are mad themselves. Or just turning the tables by asking who's the maddest person you've ever treated. You start to feel on the back foot and like you're now being assessed by them. As time continues, they will attribute a lot of their own emotions to you as the projection deepens. Egg commenting that you look sad, asking if you're okay, or conversely asking why you got angry just then. As time passes, their effect turns from micro expressions to more overt dominant displays. Leaning back, smirking, getting up and striding around etc. By this point your initial gut feeling is getting more supportive evidence, and it's time to bust out the validated measures. The biggest sign of all is a general unwillingness to show any vulnerability at all, or to be in a one-down position. The engagement will be superficial, often pally or matey, with lots of banter and joking, always flying close to the wind of outright mockery and contempt. They will start subtly and increasingly become overt in their need to control and dominate the therapy sessions. If the therapist maintains an aloof control, the ante may keep being raised and even end up with overt intimidation of the therapist. Not a psychologist, but from my experience of dating a psychopath, didn't know until years in. A lot of what appears as emotion is simply mirroring emotions they see others exhibit, and how they believe is a socially appropriate way to respond, whether or not they actually feel that way. This is how they blend in and appear normal to the average person. They are narcissistic, and everything revolves around them. They are always able to place blame on other people. Nothing is ever their fault. However, anything positive in their lives or others' lives is because of them. Because they are narcissists, they believe they are much more important than they actually are. They have strong influence over others because of their ability to feel nothing when manipulating others. And this is how they exert control over others. They will do whatever it takes in order to come out on top of a situation with no actual regard for others' lives or feelings. They may fake their feelings or reactions to continue to manipulate those around them. And they get pleasure over having control over other people and feeling like they are pulling all the strings. Not a psych, but I was in the room where my mum was being evaluated. Well, I wasn't in the room. It was like a police interrogation room with the one-way glass. I was there because they needed to interview me for an outsider's perspective. Anyways, my mum got arrested on suspicion to commit a violent crime. To set the scene, she was handcuffed to a table and she was pissed. She's always had volatile anger issues due to heavy drug and alcohol use. She was being talked to, questioned, all this other stuff. I was there for about 3 hours. She kept running this lady in circles to divert her from the actual problem. She was insanely calm, answering questions about various things that would scare a normal person. She barely showed empathy for anything, and it was terrifying for me to watch. I knew she wasn't right in the head anyways. She was abusive to both my brother and I, but seeing how she handled the situation at hand, I'm glad I got out of there, or it would have gotten much worse. I haven't talked to her in about 4 years, but she's tried to get in contact. I can't trust her, and don't think I ever will again. Not a psychologist, but I read a story about a neurologist that did a brain scan on himself and found out he was a psychopath. The eyes when they believe they're supposed to put on an emotion. You have to understand. It's going ouch when you bang your funny bone, even though it doesn't hurt. Because all your life, people have cried out in pain when they've banged their elbow. You meet enough people like that, and you find yourself hating any obligational situation in your life when you have to lie, like being asked how you are and saying good when you're not, simply because all you can associate it with is them. Okay, so what's the difference between psychopathy and narcissism? People seem to be only focusing on how most psychopaths are narcissistic, but they are not really mentioning anything else. I'm autistic, and because of my very low empathy, I come across as mildly psychopathic. However, I have very low self-esteem. I do not manipulate people, as far as I can tell. My former roommate, on the other hand, was a narcissist to a trash steep T, to the point where she abused and manipulated me in so many ways over the course of a year. Yet the descriptions in this thread are conflating. So what other traits of a psychopath are there? What differentiates us? I'm not a psychologist, but I know a few. Have studied it extensively, and my sister works with MH in the police. He told me he tried to care how people feel, but he doesn't know how that would even come about. How do you know you care for someone? How do you not feel indifferent? He just said he has 3 emotions: indifference, anger and pity. Not a psychologist, but a nurse who sees way too many psych cases. One time I had a part who was brought in after trying to break into a family's house while they were home. He was on my telemetry unit because his electrolytes were out of whack, and he was acting like he didn't remember trying to bust into an entire family's house with them home. He was getting antsy, but the hospital I worked at had a stupid fall risk policy that kept patients in bed, even if they were young/healthy/capable of being responsible for their fall. Mental health patients like to pace, especially when they start to feel like they're using it. So, anyway, I'm trying to keep dude in bed because if his feet touch the floor a loud alarm would go off, pushing his crazy ass closer to the edge. So, I'm in there trying to talk to him and de-escalate. We are talking and he tells me he is a bad person, that his cat was mutilated, and his sister asked what happened to it, and he told her the dog did it. But he told me that his secret is that he did it. He killed the cat so bad that it looked like a dog ripped it to pieces. He also shared with me that he knew what he was doing when he tried breaking into the family's home, and that he wants to hurt people. Of course, I shared this info with the hospitalist and the psychologist, and naturally, he was discharged free and clear the next day. No follow up with the law or outpatient psych. Gotta love it. Psychopaths be in here tacking notes on how to not get caught. I typed out a long response to this, but then deleted it because I couldn't really describe it without giving too many details away. One thing I will say is that psychopaths aren't all your classic murderous criminals. Sometimes the nicest people you'll meet are psychopaths, and it's all an act to manipulate you to do what they want or think a certain way about them, because that makes them feel like they've won and or are superior to you. Watch out for the nice guys. I had one, and it was so bizarre and haunting. I was doing a psych evaluation on a tween. I think he was like 12 and was in the early stage of doing the clinical interview with him and his mother. The mother described various acts of violence the child had done, in addition to other things, and I listened to the child's explanations of why. After I walked them out of the office, I remember talking to a colleague that this was the first time I had encountered a sociopath in the making. Why wouldn't a psychopath try to get mental health treatment? Don't they think they don't need it? The best way to know for sure is to sit down with a psychologist and tell them, without reservation, about your life and the way you experience the world. If you're more interested in self-diagnosis, although I would advise against it as it's entirely meaningless due to self-deception and bias, there are plenty of resources available online. You could easily find a copy of the DSM-V with 5 minutes or less of online searching. If you're looking for personal experiences which align with yours, just read through Reddit. There are plenty of us floating around. Some things you could look for pretty easily. 2. Do you feel empathy? Have you ever felt bad for hurting someone? Do you get sad when people leave your life? Do you miss people when they leave? Are your emotions particularly strong or long-lived? Have you ever felt love? Are you generally law-abiding due to moral reasons? Do you get outraged at moral offenses? Are you prone to loneliness? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then I would say it's unlikely that you're a sociopath. But then, I'm only able to speak from my own experience, and I'm not a psychologist.